analytical analyses to better arm you with some facts, information, f of x's, such that you could better get your eyes on the prize and find your fulfillment. If you would stand by for a moment here, I had to figure out my setup. So if you were in the stream before, I clicked the wrong thing, low IQ moment. I accidentally ended the stream instead of deleting the space that quit itself out here. And if you're in the space, stand by. I'll open it up momentarily. I usually do, in case you've missed it, I do the live stream for about 40 minutes and then I open the space up. But today, I might open the space a little earlier just to get some ideas going because, as I mentioned, I almost didn't do a show today because I couldn't really come up with any ideas or topics to analyze other than fucking women. LOL. So maybe it's on me. Maybe it's on me for bitch moaning about women too much or something. So, but I decided instead it'd be a good time to review what is based therapy. What does it mean for me to be the based therapist? Because many are skeptical of therapy given the usual suspects of woke stuff and globo homo. So we're going to review that, especially if you missed my big space on it a few months ago, as well as some of my writings about based therapy. So excuse my voice a little bit too. I am a sneezy Sally here. I have my tissues here, and it's kind of funny. It looks so like stereotypical, like the streamer dude, the dude who's trying to stream, and it's like there's fucking dirty tissues right there because I forgot to bring a garbage can in here. So that's funny. Before we begin, like, subscribe, retweet, reply, Marchese maxing, and the space ended itself again. So I'm going to have to just open up a space after the stream. So if you're in the stream, feel free to watch that. And we'll sort this out here. Anyway, Elon's stuff here. Real good stuff here. Real good stuff with our 5,000 IQ immigrants. Let me put this on the notifications tab instead of my profile so that the live stream isn't playing. And then, yikes, we're having like issues here. Well, so you can see I got a haircut. Haircut here, checked in. So I'll see how long I could go with this base therapy stuff, and maybe the stream won't go all on too long because I'll see how long I could go. And but it was either maybe not have an idea but pull up the stream and be consistent, or be inconsistent and not have a stream yet again because I didn't do this yesterday. So. And that was pursuant to, I'm writing a long article, in case you've missed me reporting that I am writing a long article that's going to be the final solution to the fucking porn question, because we've been talking about that for weeks now here on Twitter, and I'm kind of sick of it because both sides are becoming histrionic about it, although I'm not going to be a gay centrist here. Like, fundamentally, this problem is kind of becoming like women being more histrionic than men. So that's that. All right, so based therapy. So what does that mean? What is that all about? So I would say, imagine that the first inimical, is that the word? I know inimical is the word. The noun version of inimical. People are inimical to therapy because they rightfully detect that most of it, for most people, is just sort of enablement. Most people just go and sort of get their feelings heard, and their concept of therapy for everybody is you go and you get your feelings heard and authorized and enabled, and therefore you get to carry on with your life. It's about feeling better, so to speak, feeling better, ameliorating your emotions. And while that's certainly part of it, part of what you need to ameliorate your emotions is to find the root cause of your emotions. And so most therapists, you are right in sentiment that most therapists can't do that. Most therapists are low IQ retards who are there because of their vague globo homo conception of ethics of I'm going to heckin' frickin' do a wholesome chungus fulfillment and make somebody feel better. So rightfully, most people are inimical to that because that's just sort of masturbatory. One of my buddies here, one of my good old buddies, my IRL buddies in that therapy space said, isn't therapy sort of masturbatory in that you're just sort of getting off to those feelings and all that? And then I think there's a faction, particularly amongst the right, wherein they do want it to be problem solving. They do want there to be a problem solving approach. Excuse me. I'm going to have to blow my nose here. Excuse me. I am a sneezy Sally here this morning. Okay. And everyone also feels or understands, kind of like a lot of us in the right are originating in like success bro stuff, success broing. And so we all understand that part of success broing is just like action, is just do something about your circumstances. Now, I think the first step of the problem of this is that many people, especially on the right, are considering this a deterministic problem, wherein we all learned 10 years ago that if you get sunlight, if you work out, if you like read, that basically especially the working out, that basically solves 80% of your issues of unhappiness, discontent. But first of all, this determinism stuff ironically provides a convenient excuse. Now we have a convenient excuse to actually avoid these emotions, and the determinism makes it such that we could just make the emotions go away without fully processing them. And that is the first step of why it's wrong to sort of neglect therapy overall, to neglect psychotherapy completely and overall. And so that is the first problem, because those feelings are going to sit there and bubble. They're going to sit there and marinate no matter what. And sort of the cope here is they want to dodge the discomfort of those negative feelings. So the determinism of health and fitness and all that stuff is wrong in that way. And it's also wrong in that way structurally, because it neglects pathology. And the pathology in psychology is all about where, thing happens. Maybe not even thing happens, because that alludes to trauma too much. But it is some issue of low self-esteem, or maybe something happened, and then we resolve to protect ourselves from those negative feelings. But the catch sort of 22 of pathology is always we're avoiding uncomfortable feelings, but we're also self-sabotaging in so doing, because that protectiveness neglects actually self-development, neglects any form of fully resolving that feeling, because we're not letting ourselves feel it. And so that is the first step of the issue of neglecting or antagonizing or criticizing therapy. So everyone rightfully understands that there's a masturbatory thing, but you could also trust yourself too. Especially with this stuff, this is sort of related to the college problem. The people who say, oh, college, it's going to indoctrinate you. It's like, it only could indoctrinate you if you don't fully believe what you believe, and you're susceptible and vulnerable to that. So, and according to what are you so susceptible and vulnerable? And you should sort of trust yourself. I mean, suppose feminism does indoctrinate you. That implies that you think that that's the truth. And so really, it's all about seeking truth. And if you're convinced that that is the truth, then it doesn't make sense for you to be afraid of that, because you will then find that to be true. So trust yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust that you want to actually do and feel and be better. And trust yourself that you will embark upon the discomfort, the growth, the workout, so to speak, for your mind in actual serious-based therapy. So the feelings stuff and the determinism of working out neglects pathology. I'm trying to think of a better way to say this as we speak here. I'm trying to think of a way to elucidate this. I don't think I'm doing it justice. let's just say like a simple thing, right? A woman gets sexually assaulted or something. And so one of the pathological responses is to become promiscuous. And why do we do that? Well, when our mind instinctively doesn't want to feel bad feelings, negative feelings, and everything associated. So for her to process that happened to her and integrate that into her memory and what it was and how she sort of carries on with her life, she has to feel it. She has to feel the discomfort of that, the sort of offense against her sovereignty, the sort of sensation that something was taken from her. And so rather than deal with that, and mind you, a lot of the time I always like talk about this as a cope. Sometimes it is just sort of earnest in a way, in that it's not so rationally excusing themselves. Sometimes it's just sort of a response that we do because we're either uninformed or because we're yet to understand the value in experiencing our feelings and feeling our feelings. And so, what does a woman like that do? Well, one of the responses is promiscuity. And promiscuity, you would think, is ironic in that case. But what does the promiscuity do? The promiscuity sort of obscures and fogs up and nebulizes that happened to her. In fact, it's almost like if she consistently, promiscuously has sex with all different sorts of men, women even maybe, it sort of is an attempt to regain that sexual sovereignty. If it's on her terms thereafter, and if she can assert continuously it's on her terms, that sort of berates and belittles and buries the feeling of that time that it wasn't on her terms, the time that it didn't belong to her, her body didn't belong to her, that time that she was insovereign. And I think that also sort of does like a numbing effect on the feeling, in that, well, okay, that one time, but there's this whole sort of plethora of experiences. And so it's sort of obscured. It's sort of saying, well, yeah, that was one time, but it doesn't really matter because there's all these other times. So that's an example of how no amount of working out could solve that for a woman. No amount of working out could reconcile that. Even among some of my stories, I hadn't fully resolved some of my pathological elements with working out. Working out certainly helped, and working out certainly provoked the sensation of understanding discipline and understanding that for me to solve my pathological response, my maladaptive behaviors, I had to subject myself to the process and subject myself to that discomfort of the actual therapeutic process. So that's that there. That's an example of how no amount of working out or whatever, or base steak or sunlight, is going to really resolve that fully. To resolve that, she would have to reconcile and subject herself to the feeling of what that was and go from there. I would say, too, that a lot of pathology comes from perspectives. A lot of pathology comes from flaws in thinking. And subsequently, you're left to conclude that you're not good enough or something like that. I'll give you my pathology, my maladaptive behavior example. For the longest time, I subscribed to that stupid idea that men are only manly if women assign them manliness through having sex with them. So that sets you up for disaster. If you're rejected once, it's kind of like over for you for many of these people. And that's a lot of what, especially when the PUA red pill type stuff talks about, pre-selection and you're led to believe that everyone could see that you were rejected at the very least one time, and therefore you're like a pussy. You think that you're like a pussy to everyone. And when you have that level of thinking leading you down that road and leading you down that road to not good enough, you will ultimately, no amount of, working out will help, but if you still subscribe, or if you still think that, well, it doesn't matter if you're not approved of, you're going to be miserable. You're going to hate yourself. You're going to have low self-esteem, and you're going to be preoccupied with this your whole life. So that's another example there. So now, how do you resolve this? What does it mean for base therapy to actually, what is the process? And I'll say with you, it's not really so feelsy, touchy, oh, feel bad, feel good, and oh, it's okay, that sort of thing. A good based therapist will challenge you. It's actually like uncomfortable. It's actually challenging. Sometimes you kind of like argue back and forth. And what that is it's all about analysis. It's all about an exposure of what's going on in your thoughts and feelings and mind. And that's generally uncomfortable, especially in the confines of talking to somebody that you don't really always have a particular relationship with. But of course, a base therapist will also understand the value of having the relationship within that, sort of like friendship. In a way, it sort of is like a big bro. It is like a dad for hire, so to speak, to giving you advice, to helping you understand yourself and your circumstance. My sinus is here. Excuse me on that. And so their training and their capability to analyze will be that they will challenge you to dig into your thoughts and your feelings and your perspective and challenge those. It's actually an analysis. The original stuff, psychoanalysis, it's actually like an analysis. You're tracing the linearity of this. You're tracing this and you're arriving at a problem solving approach. An approach of simply, it's not enough just to enable or authorize, what's the word here? I'm trying to think. Legitimize your feelings. It is about, okay, now what do we do? What are these feelings and where are they coming from? And how can we resolve this? And this is evident in some of my content, in some of my analyses. Let's think about, I guess, in the context of relationships. One of the issues is just simply if you have low self-esteem, you will struggle to get into a relationship because you will fear intimacy. You will fear intimacy because you presume that if you're judging yourself this way, if you think of yourself poorly, you presume that the other person will think of you poorly. And if they think of you poorly, and if that's made evident in your interactions with them, it's going to inflict a wound. It is going to hurt that sense of self, what little sense of self you have. Now, where does this go wrong? This goes wrong because what does it actually mean to build up a self-esteem? What does it actually mean to have confidence? And I always say, sort of something that's been going around forever is keeping your promises to yourself. I would say another version of stating that is living up to your ideal image of yourself. But what is the problem with that? The problem with that is that that too is uncomfortable. That too entails effort. That too entails energy that our little baby lizard brains doesn't like because of that human condition of suffering. That is that we have a goal of happiness, fulfillment, and higher self-esteem, but it's directly antithetical to our survivalist lizard brains telling us to optimize energy at every juncture. And so how does pathology erupt from this? How does pathology sprout from this? It sprouts by way of trying to find a way to rationalize, sort of put on an image, put on a show for our superego, put on a show for our moral character, our moral judge, to suggest that we are technically actually doing right and technically actually living up to ourselves as we are in this easy way, in this easy juncture, such that we are resolved. We're good there. So let me give you an example. A real good example there is a lot of this fitness stuff. This fitness stuff is transmuting the words health and transmuting the words fit. Like, okay, long story short, and maybe I've said this, maybe this isn't really, this is just the foundation of the fitness problem. The foundation of this, particularly amongst the right, is that you have this problem. Fitness is the like grounding thing of all of this stuff with optimizing energy and all of that. outputting energy versus taking energy in. Fitness is the most direct problem or confrontation with that instinct, because that is actually, that doesn't even emulate putting out energy and taking energy in. That is putting out energy and taking energy in. So we have this ideal image of ourselves, which is to have the sexed up, freak beast, gym bro physique. Because we value that, we actually have an inscribed valuation of our bodies, of our musculature upon ourselves. But we don't want to do that because our little baby lizard brain tells us, well, we're going to die if we use energy in so doing. And so when it tells us that, struggling here today, huh? I'm struggling to really get my thoughts together here today. Low IQ moment. It's so over, but got to stay consistent, got to stay disciplined on this stuff. So what do people do? What do people do when they want to have the sexed up physique but don't want to put forth the energy? They come up with rationalizations. They come up with excuses. And so one of the ways this manifests on the right wing is this based epic steak and eggs health red pill type stuff. Oh, well, eating steak and eggs is healthy, so therefore I get to eat as much steak and eggs as I want and as much as will feel good. I get to stuff my face. And since it's healthy and it's based and it's challenging the regime, it's challenging the consensus, therefore it gets me sexed up. And therefore I don't have to work out. And it's sort of crazy when you say it like this. It sort of sounds delusional because obviously that doesn't fucking produce results. But so long as you could sort of rationalize and so long as you could pretend that isn't happening by doing this construct, by doing this rationale, they sort of bury the part, they conveniently bury the part where their physique isn't actually sexed up. They pretend, they sort of just pretend that's not happening. They just sort of pull the wall over their eyes on that part to then say, oh, look, I'm sexed up. I have the physique. I'm living up to my ideal. Therefore, I'm good. QED, done. Guilt be gone. And so this becomes pathological because what do you have to keep doing? You have to keep up the act. You have to keep up the act by always talking about this stuff, by always telling yourself you're doing well and you're eating right and you're healthy and everything. But ultimately, you have a latent feeling of discontent and low self-esteem because you didn't actually do what you needed to do to get what you want. Some other versions of this is, and I did a video on it. I actually have the article almost ready. That is about this Liver King thing. So if you remember the Liver King story, turned out he did steroids or something, and everyone was up in fucking arms about, oh, he freaking lied, and he freaking hurt my feelings. It's like, really? He hurt you? What is fucking wrong with you faggots? Now, why were people so reactive to that? It wasn't because he was dishonest or something, but they got so much out of this. They got to fucking whack their fucking emotional ego fucking wood to this. Firstly, they got to morally posture. And by projecting this, now he did do something wrong per se, but by laying it on thick about how wrong that was, they got to place their feelings of themselves and their wrongdoings more outwards. And they got to compare themselves and say, well, since I'm linearly more moral than him, because he did steroids and he lied about it, therefore, I get to cross this binary threshold of, oh, well, I actually am moral. I actually am living a good life. And this comparison, this projective type stuff is what you fucking do when you're not actually keeping your promises to yourself. When it's a whole rationalization. Nothing in their behavior really crosses the binary threshold of they're keeping their promises to themselves, of they're living righteously. because that doesn't change whether or not you fucking like Liver King doing steroids or something. It has nothing to do with whether or not you went to the gym today. But they need to feel right instead of do right and then let that make them feel right. They just want to directly attack the feeling. And so they rationalize, and so they project. They also got a secondary element overall out of being a fan of Liver King with this parasocial relationship wherein they got to convince themselves that, well, since I am a part of this community, I'm a part of this fitness community with Liver King, therefore I must be fit, I must be into this stuff. If I get it, if I get the jokes, and if I get how to relate to him, that must mean that we have similar behaviors and thoughts and feelings. And if we have similar behaviors, I must be behaving like he is. And if his main behavioral thing is the gym, I must be doing the gym and the working out in the same way he is. And if I'm doing that in the same way he is, I must have the same physique, QED. Or I must have a similar physique, QED. So this is an example of pathology. This is an example of what based therapy deconstructs and ameliorates and reconciles, because none of that fucking changes whether or not you actually went to the gym today and challenged yourself seriously and put forth that energy and subjected yourself to the discomfort. They'll do this sort of rationalization, they'll relationship type thing. Some guys in the gym have done that with me. They try to make like they're my buddy so that they could sort of almost like be big by association. And so that is what some of base therapy is. I'm trying to think. We had a whole conversation like for hours doing this, but I suppose that was because some people had some good questions that made me think more about it. I'll just say, look, you're right to find therapy in the grand scheme of things, the bell curve of therapy, abhorrent, offensive, bitchy, whiny. A lot of people do go to therapy to get themselves enabled, and a lot of therapists do enable them. Because legitimizing the feelings legitimizes the behavior sometimes. And if the behavior is legitimized, they get to sort of keep themselves excused. If they're discontented with something but don't want to do something about it, they'll go to a therapist to feel, to talk about their feelings. And when the therapist legitimizes that, sometimes they take that and transmute it to legitimize their behavior. And therefore, they just get to keep behaving the way that they are, and their behavior when it's self-sabotatory. But the therapist, this is also what they do. Since the therapist is like the trained expert, if the therapist enables them, which maybe sometimes the therapist doesn't even enable them, they just take whatever the therapist says and sort of rationalize it. This remarkable thing that people can do to rationalize anything and fucking everything. So they'll rationalize it to keep behaving the way that they are, that's comfortable, that is excusing themselves, and that way they get to live guilt-free while also not challenging themselves. So I would say there is that problem, but trust yourself that you won't do that, and trust yourself that the pattern amongst all of these is that everyone everywhere is going to have a latent low self-esteem and latent discontent if they behave that way. Everyone everywhere is going to still hate themselves when they do this excuse stuff, when they do this self-sabotage stuff. And so for you, it becomes eyes on the prize. That's why my slogan is eyes on the prize. Finding your fulfillment. because inevitably you know deep down if you're not happy and if you have low self-esteem and if you're not happy with your life and the way it's going, you might not know why, you might not know how, but you do know that if you're rationalizing or excusing, that feeling is always still going to be there. And just think about it. I don't know if you heard the cat there. And if you just think about it, what else do you have? What else is there to do? Because these feelings and all of that are not the same thing as happiness, joy, and fulfillment. So, I don't know. I guess this one will be a short one here. I'm doing not too all that great a job of elucidating everything and constructing a linearity here. I think I'm just a little distracted by my nose being stuffy, the goy beams making my nose stuffy and sneezy, and also this big article that I have coming out. I'm sort of preoccupied with that there, so I don't know. There's a handful of people on Rumble, handful of people on X. I'm going to try starting the spaced up here. If you know what, as a matter of fact, DM me so that I don't just start a space and it turns out to suck or something. So, yeah, my bad on this one, but hey, you gotta. This is how it goes. If you're doing this every day, you gotta stay consistent. You gotta stay disciplined. You gotta do what it takes. It's sort of like working out. Not every workout is gonna be a good one, but you just gotta do it. So maybe I'll do a base therapy part 2 tomorrow or something when I gather my thoughts a little bit better. So let's see what else is going on here. Let me check notifications here. I mean, another example of this is cigarettes are cool, and cigarette societies are what frickin' conquered the world, and weed smoking societies were the base or the degenerate brownoid ones. And it's like, yeah, you just want a fucking excuse to smoke your precious cigarettes to feelsy goodsy and to excuse yourself from guilt and excuse your indulgence by saying, well, cigarettes are societies that do cool things, so therefore I should smoke cigarettes. Yeah, no, actually, cigarettes are not what fucking caused people to, like, white people or whatever to conquer society. So, anyway, maybe I shouldn't torture you here too long here. I appreciate everyone who stayed in the stream here. Be sure to like, subscribe, retweet, follow, reply, Marchese Max. If you would like one-on-one coaching, head on over to marchesemethods.com for one-on-one coaching for one session, or you can do 4 sessions up front for a discount. And DM or email me, marchesemethods@proton.me, to get access to my Discord. For $5 a month, you can text me all day, every day for questions, help, advice, and also send a super chat or a question through entropystream.live/Marchese Methods. I'll see you tomorrow. I will gather some better thoughts for next time. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m.